Good Tuesday morning, post Martin Luther King holiday, post Inauguration Day. The news is full of stuff that actually had news in it that was so much that I'm going to have to go back and finish reading it later. My name is Karl Dakin, and I am the host of the Successful Funding Show. I present myself as the capital coach, as I provide a variety of services, which are now expanding. We've been working on them over the holidays to add a number of additional different types of packages dealing with opportunity realization. And all of that information is on my webpage at dakincapital.com. Today, we are going to take a little bit of a change in the Successful Funding Show. Typically, we talk to people about different funding issues here, there, wherever, but we're going to kind of zero in today, and we're going to talk about raising funding for an AI business, but more specifically, we're going to be talking about raising funding for the company Knowledge Avatars. I have with me today Emiliano de Laurentiis, who is the founder of Knowledge Avatars. And I'm going to put a little bit more of this in perspective before we jump into today's conversation. Emiliano has been working with AI forever. I just say that because most everybody I know who's working with AI jumped on the AI opportunity bandwagon in the last 12 to 24 months. And Emiliano was working on it before AI was even the term that people used to describe what he was doing. So he is coming at this opportunity with great background and experience, which will come out in our conversation today. Second thing, for point of clarification and transparency, I've been working with Emiliano for the last few years. He has helped me put together CAP, who is the general purpose AI knowledge avatar that's on my website. If you go to dakincapital.com and then look under CAP, you'll find this avatar where you can ask it endless questions on the question of funding and entrepreneurship. And I encourage you to do that. And we'll put up some links here later in the show for you to take a look at that. As further transparency, Emiliano and I are talking about myself coming on the board of Knowledge Avatars, and we have been talking about putting together a capital campaign for 2025, and we are working on that. And we'll talk about some of the challenges that we see, some of the strategies we're considering today in going at this. But in this case, we're talking about a specific AI business within the overall AI industry, within the fast-moving technology and innovation occurring. And so this makes a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today appropriate, timely, and useful to anyone who's looking to raise funding in general, but more particularly if you're doing anything with or around AI. Now, before jumping in, just to make it a little more complicated, a lot of the people who are potential customers for Knowledge Avatars have no funding. And this is not uncommon because Knowledge Avatars is a learning system, a learning platform. And a lot of the people who would benefit from use of Knowledge Avatars products or services, however you want to describe an AI, there are schools and libraries and nonprofits and other groups who have always challenges and have enough money to do everything they want to do. And in the current administration's announcements yesterday, they may have less money to work with going forward. So we're also going to talk about how do you sell a product to someone who has no money by facilitating or supporting them in conducting their own capital campaign. So we're going to be a little bit bifurcated. I think that's the right word we're going to use for today to describe what we're going on. But Emiliano has been a guest on my show before, but for those who are new today, please, if you would, Emiliano, share a little bit of your background in forming Knowledge Avatars, where you're at and where you're headed, and then we'll say hello to some of the people who have joined us in our audience today.
Karl, thank you for having me on the show once again. It's always a pleasure being here, and I think it's an interesting story about how to develop a company. And this is my third company in this space, in the education space that I've developed, and it's been an interesting journey. My first company was I started in 1981. Called Arrakis Systems, and during that time, I developed a series of educational products that taught math, science, and physics. Math and science, basically. But also, there are also other topics that we taught. We had Chinese was one of the topics we taught. English, Shakespeare was something else we were working on, and these products were all published by Prentice Hall in the mid 80s, and funded by Coles in Canada. Cliff Notes and Coles Notes were our sort of partners between Canada and the U.S., and Coles funded us for this project. So that was our first foray into education, and this was before the user interface that we now are familiar with Macintoshes, for example, that the Macintosh brought about. So people were communicating with computers with commands. So what did we do? We added the chatbot to the system, and it was arguably, it was probably the first chatbot that was ever used in an educational environment. And this was, like I said, in the 1980s. And you could talk to this chatbot and ask it questions like, please define what is speed versus velocity. Give me an example of velocity. Test me on velocity, things of that sort. So we were quite early in that process, and believe it or not, those products which were working on floppy disks are still being used in some parts of the world. I've received a call just about 2 or 3 years ago from an educator in India who is still using our software, and he's been using our software for the last 30 years. He started when he was 40, and now he's in the 70s. so it's quite an interesting story. And then when the internet started in 1991, I immediately got a team together to start developing educational software on the internet, and that was a company called lifelong.com to provide lifelong learning. And within a few years, we were getting 1 million hits every month. We had something like 40,000 teachers sign up to our service, and again, it was a fascinating project. In fact, a version of our software was licensed to China, and it became the top 10 educational software in China. I think this was around 2000. We went public when all the .coms went public in the late 90s, and we were on NASDAQ for a little while as well. So that was another interesting trip through entrepreneurship. And that we also won the National Information Infrastructure Award that Al Gore was giving out in those days. So that was an award. Plus other awards, we also received awards from the Discover magazine and the Science Museum in San Francisco and so on. And so we had quite a few accolades from that project. So I decided that I had to develop a sort of the ultimate educational environment, something that wasn't just something that where we could create products, but where anybody can come in and create their own educational environment, their own educational product that individualized learning, and really the goal here is to individualize the learning experience, not to have something that is generic to anybody that is published for the rest of the world, but where any teacher or any educator can come in and create their own individualized product, and something that teaches the way they want to teach, and it teaches the content that they want to teach. And so I set out almost 10 years ago to create an environment where any teacher can come in, create a product that an AI essentially that represents them, that is a teaching assistant to them, and that can help them teach more effectively. Classroom sizes are always too large, and it's very hard for teachers to give the individual attention in this industrialized environment. Very hard for teachers to give students this the individualized attention they would like to give them. And so with knowledge avatars, a teacher can come in for a very reasonable fee. The barrier to entry is very low. They can come in and create a knowledge avatar that is their educational representative, their teaching assistant to teach effectively. And that is it's a fascinating thing. We could, our system can scale to millions or even billions of users. We're running on AWS. Amazon loves us. In fact, they've recently put some money into the company, and we are looking at expanding and making sure that we have as many people using knowledge avatars as possible.
Okay, so hold on there for a moment. I'm going to welcome the people in our audience. I'm going to make a number of wild observations here, which may blow everybody's minds. Good morning first to Zach Dane. Zach is a local entrepreneur here in the Denver area who is working towards a model for fractional ownership in real estate, which is both facilitates entrepreneurs in buying real estate for development and so forth. So it's a benefit to the entrepreneur, but it also will allow individuals who are not land developers or necessarily big dollar investors to participate in the appreciation of this property. So it has multiple different applications, and I'm always curious to see where Zach is going next. And then we have Dennis with us. Good morning, Dennis. Thank you for joining us. Dennis has been a guest on other shows where I've been on the seat where Emiliano is now sitting as a guest. And so we haven't met in person, but look forward to a conversation. And then we have a person who I haven't met before, Subroto. Thank you for coming and listening to the show this morning. I thank all of you for participating. And anyone who's out there who is listening to the show live, you're encouraged to comment, say hello, but more importantly, ask questions, which may be more pertinent to your particular situation, because this show is here to help you learn about funding, for me to share what I know. And in this case, we have Emiliano as what we call a real live opportunity for funding. We've got an actual live example to work with. So a couple things I want to observe from what Emiliano already told me, because this is going to be a live demonstration. Emiliano shared his story. I call it the backstory. This is the story of how Emiliano got to today from where he's been in the past. And this has to be part of every story that you put together when you're talking with investor candidates, because they want to know, is the love of your life, your business, or how committed, how long have you been engaged in the business? And Emiliano has just shown that he's been working with education for a long, long time. This is his passion. This is what he cares about. And this is what investors are looking for. A lot of people who've jumped into AI in the last year have no history. They just got here. And you don't know, because they just got here, whether they're going to be here for the long haul or they're simply jumping from one opportunity to the next. We call this is the green, grass is always greener syndrome. When we talk to entrepreneurs, how serious are they about something? It's one of the things I laugh about when I see a pitch competition, because the student typically, or a young entrepreneur, will get on stage and they'll tell you how serious they are about this project. And then we go, well, how am I going to exit from my investment if I give you some money? And they're going, we're going to sell it to someone else in 3 to 5 years. They're already planning the exit by leaving the business, which tells me they don't care. They don't have an affinity. They don't have the passion about this business. They're simply out to make some money with somebody else's money, which is not the level of engagement that I look for from an investor standpoint. So Emiliano has already demonstrated that this is his passion, and that's a really good thing. Then as he's talking, he's telling the story, the evolution of education. And in some ways, it parallels my own thinking in terms of funding. He's going from a standard in education where you teach in a large classroom. It's called batch education. And in many cases, it's worse than that. It's centralized batch education where the student has to drop everything they're doing in life. They have to go to a classroom. They have to sit in front of an instructor. They have to do this for large blocks of time. And this is a major, serious investment of time by a student because the system is not designed for individuality. So in working with Emiliano towards using the internet, using AI, using avatars to allow the education to be 100% personalized, to be one-to-one capability. This is moving from batch processing to bespoke education, and it gives a value that cannot be matched in the classroom. I did a presentation last week, shout out to Andy Sherbo at the University of Denver on entrepreneurial finance last week, where I came in as a lecturer and I had 30 students in the room. And in an hour, which was the time I was given to share a little bit of what I know about funding on entrepreneurial finance, I had about 7 students out of the 30 ask me questions. Now, it's quite possible that the remainder of the class also had questions, but there simply wasn't time for that, or the level of engagement may not have been there. And so this shift that's occurring within the knowledge avatars is basically a recognition of new technology that changes the paradigm and how education can occur going forward. So you're moving from what we call batch or one-on-many type of education to one-on-one. The other thing that is very important that I think, particularly for people who don't have time to go to school, who are working, who are engaged in a job already, is what I call just-in-time education, which is the distinction between having to learn a whole lot of stuff or be given a book and a course and everything over a long period of time, as opposed to I need to know one thing. So as an example, I use an Apricorn external hard disk, which is an encrypted data storage device on my laptop where I keep all my data. And Windows updated their system a few weeks ago, and I found out that this device was not whitelisted, and automatically it would start shutting down sporadically and became almost useless as a storage device. So I reached out to Apricorn and I said, what do I do? And they sent me an instruction with some code for my regedit. The problem was those instructions were incomplete. The first time I tried to implement them, I achieved a blue screen on my laptop, and it took me some hours to get my laptop back to working again. But I was fortunate yesterday that I finally figured it out, and I'm sitting there going, it would have been helpful if they just give me 5 more lines of instruction. I could have implemented this whole thing in about 5 minutes and moved on, but I've now lost hours and interference and reduction in productivity. If Apricorn, the manufacturer of this external hard disk, would create a training manual that is broken out in the form of a knowledge avatar, I could have asked it one question, and if it gave me a complete answer, I would have been up and gone, and I would have thought Apricorn is one of the best manufacturers in the world. I don't hold them in that high esteem right now because of the fact that they failed to give me a simple, clear, easy way to fix my problem. But this is an example of just-in-time education that can have immense value. So now, as Emiliano was talking through this, he also made the statement that his solution, his Knowledge Avatars platform, is scalable. And scalable is a big deal. Again, as an entrepreneur, when you're telling your story of how good your product or service is, it's typically a story told in the context of a single customer. And you're going, okay, how much time and energy did you spend in order to make the sale, to install or support the sale of that product, and then whatever follows after that. And if it's too much time and energy by you or by your customer in order to gain the benefit or value of that particular product or service, then this is an obstacle or a challenge to your scalability or your ability to grow up your business by more sales, because too much time and energy is being spent. And this is one of the things about Knowledge Avatars that was achieved last year, was the ability to achieve almost instant training, where it's a cut and paste. I could take the transcript from today's video program and I can upload it in a minute into my CAP avatar, and immediately it has all the knowledge, all the questions, all the exchange that occurred in today's program to add to its body of knowledge. That quickness, that efficiency in being able to train up an AI is different from a lot of AIs that are out there. It's certainly different from chatbots, which are not AIs, which are using pre-programmed scripts to tell you an answer to a pre-programmed question, which if you don't ask it correctly, they won't give you the right answer. So a lot of things are going on here in just this very short introduction by Emiliano, which in my mind are all lessons for anyone who's looking to raise funding. The next thing, I'm going to make one last observation, and then I'm going to let Emiliano and I, converse a little bit more. When something is scalable, and it looks like it's almost infinitely scalable, this is one of those rare opportunities that might become a unicorn. This is a term used in the capital industry to refer to an opportunity that may become worth $1 billion. And I'm saying it here for the first time. Emiliano's never heard me say this before. So if he falls out of his chair, that's what that's about. But there is the possibility that Knowledge Avatars could be used by anyone as an assistant, as a digital receptionist. He used the example of a teaching assistant, but there are hundreds of industries. There are multiple jobs in a small business or a large business where a Knowledge Avatar could either do the job or support someone in doing their job, and do it in a way where they're constantly updated, up to date, know what's going on, have access to all the information in a way that a person can't. And so the fact that you can then use that avatar for just-in-time education, which is, I have a question, I need an answer, and the fact that everyone can have one or two or three or more, depending upon the size of their organization, this could be $1 billion opportunity. And so the challenge now for me and Emiliano is, how do we effectively communicate the potential of this opportunity to the right investors that are there? And as another footnote, last week I put on my webinar on the topic of investor identification. This is part of an education program that's now ongoing, and there's lots of information about this course on my webpage. But we created a dedicated Knowledge Avatar just for this course called Soulmate, which represents kind of the core theme, the bespoke individuality of investing, in the same manner that Emiliano is trying to help an individual get individualized instruction. I want people who are seeking funding to find a bespoke investor, a funding soulmate. And so we named this Avatar Soulmate. We trained it up with the key concepts in finding and identifying investor candidates. And it's now running on my website for those who paid a fee to go through that particular program. But it was very quickly set up and trained in the primary concepts. It'll go through an ongoing learning process as we put different things into it, such as the video, the transcript of the 4-hour webinar. We put in the elements from the book and all the other things. And it'll be one of the most smartest, quickest, responsive people that you could go to as a non-sentient being and answer questions on this. So Emiliano, right now, we've talked about some of the candidates that you're talking to who might be customers, as we would call them. And for those, again, in the audience, if you've seen any of my presentations on investor identification, I break people into groups called stakeholders. Customers fall in this group because they stand to benefit from the success of a particular business, particularly one like Emiliano's, which is offering a relatively unique product or service. And if they want that, then they want the company to succeed, which means they may invest in the company if they have money. But Emiliano's facing kind of the other 180 degrees. He's got a lot of customers out there, prospective customers, who don't have the money right now today to buy a knowledge avatar. So we're talking about how could you help a customer do what would amount to be their own fundraising to have enough money to buy Emiliano's product. So Emiliano, why don't you share a little bit about what you're looking at there, the challenges you're facing, and then we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and so first of all, let me say, feel free to jump in, interrupt me at any time. The same thing with the audience. Please feel free to ask questions and to jump in. This is a conversation. We're not here to make speeches, and I'd like it to be more like that. Another thing is you talk about Emiliano a lot. I just want to shout out to the number of people that have actually been involved in this venture. So far, they're not all available or involved today, but overall, in the last number of years, I say that over 100 people have been involved in one way or another, either as investors or developers or contributors of some sort in knowledge avatars. So it's quite a. When I look at my Slack workspace and look at the people who have been involved, they're all still there in some way. It's an amazing group of people with a lot of skill and a lot of interesting ideas. So we have been iterating. I just want to make that clear. We've been iterating on this project and we keep on improving it. And we're still improving it every day. And that is so when I started Knowledge Avatars about 10 years ago, my goal was not to raise money and then create the product, but rather do it the other way around: create the product and then raise the money, and raising the money would be to help us scale to that unicorn level, as you put it. Because the last two companies I started, we raised the money first, or we had a small project and we raised the money and then we went on with that, and that created its own challenges, particularly because then you're dealing with the needs of the person who invested, and those needs are not necessarily always in line with the requirements of creating a great product. And our goal has always been to create a great.
They're actually seldom in line. For a number of reasons, and there's technically always a conflict of interest between the investor and the investment opportunity that cannot be erased. It's always going to be there. Now, when you achieve the closest alignment between the two, things get better. But once you have money, the clock's ticking and you have to respond to that. And the advancement of a new product or service is not on the same clock. Unfortunately, it will have its own life story, its own clock, and if they line up, good for everybody. But it rarely happens, and so you have this automatic conflict take place.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that Knowledge Avatars continues on and continues to grow beyond my involvement. That's really what I set out to do, to set out a company that meets an educational need. I graduated from McGill University in educational psychology, and that was kind of the germ of the idea, which was to individualize learning, the people who were doing research at that department at the time in the 1980s, late 70s, that was their focus. Focus is how do we individualize learning, and and it became clear to me that technology was the answer. And we've had so many different ways of doing that. And I think today we have a way that is much more advanced than we have ever had on Earth. Um, in fact, I keep on telling the story. This is an interesting story. Socrates, the philosopher, did not like books. And the reason he didn't like books is because books were a static representation of somebody's information. You read the book, you couldn't communicate with the author. You could not ask the author questions, and you couldn't debate the author. Uh, but today with AI, we can. You can have an AI that represents your knowledge, the Karl Dakin AI, and and I can debate it. Is it sentient? Maybe it is in its own way sentient, and if, we're not sure if it's not sentient. And certainly in the next 5 years we may have AI that is quite sentient. But the important thing here is to have an AI that, for me anyhow, that represents your knowledge, that represents you, and that can also succeed you after you're retired or passed away. They can still speak somehow to Karl Dakin and learn from you, and so that is the goal.
Yeah, let's point out that we've been working on CAP for a long time. I will throw out CAP here for you all to take a look at. CAP, unfortunately, was made to look kind of like me, and that's me. And this is a QR code, but you can go to my website, and there's a whole tab page for CAP where you can ask it questions. And it's an interesting question because CAP on the Knowledge Avatars platform technically has two bodies of knowledge. It's sitting on a OpenAI ChatGPT foundation, but I've built my body of knowledge from my perspective on top of it. And this is very important because I've taken consensus or information from chat, and I've now intentionally biased it towards small businesses and entrepreneurship. So if you were to ask ChatGPT a question, what are the top 10 things you should do in a pitch session? It'll give you 10 things to talk about. They're correct. If more likely you're pitching to an angel for a unicorn product in Silicon Valley. But if you are a smaller business, less technology, less profit margin, these answers become wrong because the context is wrong. This is what's important about individuality, both in education and in fundraising, because you have to know who you are, you have to know who may invest in you, and you have to focus within that area. If you get outside that area, you're either talking to the wrong person or you're telling the wrong story, and you're not going to be effective in pitching who you are, what you're trying to do. So CAP is there, but we raised the question of sentience. Sentience is a scientific term that says that a artificial intelligence is so advanced that it could mimic a human being. And we're not there yet, but to some extent, maybe we don't need to get there. It's always one of the questions is why would we reduce an artificial intelligence to the limitations of being a human when we might go around or surpass that with other capabilities. Now, I will tell you that CAP can understand you in multiple languages, which I cannot, so it's already surpassing me in that regard. But it also, because it has access to all the information within ChatGPT, it can sometimes answer a question quickly and in greater depth than I can. And so it's an interesting, I'll call it hybrid at the moment between my knowledge and OpenAI's knowledge within chat on the answer that you're going to get. And this is all good, but the more information I put in, the more precise it is to an entrepreneur who's either starting or growing their business, because I'm speaking and working from that perspective and not from everybody's perspective.
Yeah, so you asked me about what are we looking for? What is it at this stage in our evolution that we're looking at? And the answer really is that we're looking for partners that see our vision, that would like to integrate our product into their product perhaps, or use our product in some fashion. I mean, I'm working with many different partners right now who are integrating knowledge avatars in their projects. And certainly I could see some really great value, for example, in integrating our knowledge avatars in an LMS, for example, where they, really we're at the point now where we want to reach the market and get deeply into the market, and so we're looking for partners who have access to those markets.
Yep. So let me speak to that. So. Again, this is a lesson for everybody listening today, that if you have a brand new technology that has more than one market application, then you have to start doing some thinking from a strategic standpoint. Will an investor understand the value of all the different applications of that particular product, technology, innovation? Or is their perspective limited, meaning that they will see one application very well, but everything else is fuzzy, it's vague, it's ambiguous to them? Because if that's the case, they will not see the entirety of the value. Their limitation, this is the old story, the parable of the 10 blind men and the elephant. They all saw one part of the elephant, they all described the elephant differently. Well, most investors are the same way. They have their own experiences they bring to the table. They see the opportunity in one direction, and it may not be the overall omnibus comprehensive valuation. It may be a singular. So what you do at that point is you start taking your product, your technology, and breaking it into niches, market niches. And you look for a partner within each of those, and each of those niches becomes its own independent investment opportunity, where you may be able to get enough recognition of value, and you get an investor who sees that value, willing to step up and fund it, who would not do the one that is what appears to you 2 inches away. It looks to you, you're like, wow, that's the same thing, but it's, instead of education, it's over manufacturing. The guy doesn't know manufacturing, knows education. So we need to limit the pitch, the story, just to education, to keep that person on track and keep them interested, so they can see this high value instead of getting lost in too much information, which they have no ability to appreciate. So we're talking strategic partnerships now with people who see a need for artificial intelligence. They probably are already in the education industry because this was built for education. It's a natural for education. But some of the applications are not natural necessarily for use, like the earlier example I gave of the external hard disk. This is a manufacturer of a piece of electronics. They could create their user manual with an avatar, knowledge avatar, and enhance the customer experience 1,000,000% over what I experienced.
Yeah, I put together as a proof of concept. I put together a knowledge avatar to replace my car manual, and it's much superior because I can ask it to. I always forget, which kind of oil do I need to use? I know it's a synthetic oil, but what kind of oil do I use? How often do I need to change it? And I'm always and it's always buried someplace in the manual. So now the manual is sitting on my desk, but I have a QR code in my car that I just take a picture of whenever I have a question about the car. But I think some people may be asking the question, how do you fund a project? Okay, so I've talked about not raising money initially and going on and now looking for funding, to scale. So now that we have a business model, we have proof of concept, we have a solid product. How do you fund that project over time? And by the way, I do see we have some questions from the audience, and we will get to that. All right, Zach and Subroto, we will get to the blockchain. But first, let's get to this funding question. And the question is really, how do we fund it? Well, as it turns out, for the last 20 years, I've also been running a separate company, right? So that is how I funded Knowledge Avatars. Plus, there were a few angel investors. So there were a few angel investors who we're probably looking at, over a period of time, over $1 million invested in Knowledge Avatars. That has brought us to this point. And now what we're beginning to see, so for example, with AWS, we're seeing some investments from them that will help us to get to add some capabilities that we didn't have before. But at this time, we're iterating. We're improving our product on a regular basis, and we're identifying where do we need to improve. What are we hearing from the customer base? What are we hearing that we need to improve? But the initial product was, in fact, I coded the first product, and with the help also of my AI director of AI, Elizabeth Perot, and we had started this. In fact, it wasn't even Elizabeth Perot who I worked with initially. It was some other individual. Unfortunately, he was working with her technology that she had created for AI, and but then he had pancreatic cancer and passed away, and that's when I reached out to Elizabeth and said, "Listen, can we work on this together?" And she agreed to do so, and she licensed her technology to Knowledge Avatars, and now we've integrated it completely as the main engine for Knowledge Avatars. And of course, we're also using APIs with OpenAI and other LLMs to enhance our capabilities. So our product is it's a multi-level. There are many technologies that we're probably using a dozen technologies so to create a product that is more advanced, I think, than a lot of other things that people are just putting together and slapping together as fast as they can. And now that this is also about timing, right? How do you time a product? And this is it's the age-old question. In my last two companies, we were early in the market with Racket Systems in the 80s. People didn't even know what a computer was. Like we had, we still had to take the terminology of mainframes, microcomputers, and mini computers, right? So mini computer was like the size of a refrigerator, and a microcomputer was kind of a desktop computer. Then in the 90s, we talked about the internet. People still were wondering, how can we use the internet? But LifeLock, my company, was started even before we had Google, before we could monetize content with advertising. That concept hadn't been invented yet. So we were struggling with how are we going to monetize. We have 100 million hits a month, and yet we don't have a way to monetize this. So that was an issue, and now so when I started the Knowledge Avatars, I thought, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to give our system the ability to advertise, but we're also going to give people the ability to have their own personal system that they can put behind a paywall, and now of course the whole world has just all of a sudden discovered AI. But we've been working at this for a while, and we thought of a lot of different elements of how individuals can profit from this and profit from their own knowledge, rather than somebody stealing their knowledge and using it in an LLM. I think that's an important part. Yeah.
Kind of going sideways here, just to deal with the question that Zach put on the table, and as Subroto already responded, we're dealing with multiple technologies here. Blockchain, for those who are not familiar, is also called distributed ledger technology, where instead of having all of your data in a single point, which makes it susceptible to hacking, is that you parse it out, you break it into pieces and put it on multiple computers in different locations within a system that makes it virtually difficult, if not impossible, to hack because you keep everything updated and everything's trackable so that a person would have to hack multiple computers at the same time in order to successfully complete a hack. And clearly, the data today of almost everybody doing anything is being used or presented, stored in a blockchain format. But that's a technology all by itself with regard to how data is stored and parsed and held and accessed, which is contributing to a little bit to the issue of energy consumption, but I don't want to go too far down that path today. An avatar is using a large language model, which means that it has the ability to use certain computer programs or algorithms to look through a large set of data in order to see relationships and give you an answer that it thinks best represents what your query or message is looking for, which is why it's not truly answering your question. It's homogenizing an answer out of everybody else's answers to something that might have looked like a similar question. And this gives the appearance that it's giving you an answer directly to your question when it's not. So we have large language model issues there. And then when we talk about care and feeding of knowledge avatars, we're basically, as I said, on a foundation of OpenAI's large language model, but we're adding another layer of data above that, which is private. So it's not going into the open access of OpenAI, and it's different. So care and feeding, from my standpoint, is all I need to do is add new data, update more data, more extensive information about the topic of funding entrepreneurship. And I do that by what's called training, which amounts to be cut and paste from this file to this file. So the more information I put in, the more information is within my knowledge avatar, the smarter, for lack of a better description, it is. And it has reached a point where it's not quite effortless. There's still manual engagement. And Emiliano and I are now looking at ways to help automate the transfer of information into the avatar so we can reduce the manual interface in the training process. And there's so many different ways that can be achieved. But blockchain's one thing, large language models is another, knowledge avatars is another.
Right, but having said that, I do have a plan to use blockchain with knowledge avatars, and it's going to be used primarily to track and represent the knowledge that a person has acquired over time. So imagine now that you are talking to a knowledge avatar about math, and every time you engage with it, it is now adding to your blockchain about math. And now let's say you're talking to a physics knowledge avatar, and it's giving you information about that. It's adding to that blockchain to your record. And let's say now you're talking to a business funding knowledge avatar, and it asks you certain questions, and then the knowledge avatar is recording in your blockchain the information that you have gained about that. So overall, you'll be able to then query a bot and say, okay, what does Emiliano know, or what does Karl Dakin know about funding? and they'll say, well, based on all this information that is in the blockchain about what skills he has acquired, we can say that Karl is 99% proficient in the concepts required to understand funding. So that is, and that's something that then that Karl can share with a potential employer or consultant, and because it's an independent piece of information that can be used for in the world, and that can be used by an employer of some sort to verify that Karl really knows. In other words, we will eliminate resumes. Because resumes are made up, right? They're fictitious.
Well, yeah, there was a story last week of a guy who was using AI to interpret job announcements, the job requirements, and then using AI to generate his application and the cover letter so that he was basically anticipating what the person was looking for. So sometimes when you see a job listing, it's not the most precise kind of thing. And so he's doing that. So when Emiliano is talking about this, you're still building a new body of knowledge, which sits on top of the large language model. But if you use blockchain to hold that data, now you're distributing it across multiple things. The trick here, as we move forward, is how rapidly can we move information in that is specific as opposed to generic, because otherwise we're just replicating ChatGPT. If we're putting in all information everywhere, that we're just being redundant. It's when we put in our unique knowledge, stuff that only we know, or our perception of the world, however you want to describe that this all takes on a completely different character, a different value, because now we are, as Emiliano described earlier, we're becoming our own Socrates. We're not being limited by what we put on paper, but we're able to craft and collect and put all this together to elevate this body of knowledge where it's immediately accessible through a knowledge avatars. And that's a level above and different from everything else that I've seen in the market today. Most things have either a thin veneer of knowledge, which isn't necessarily scalable, or it's outdated. It gets obsolete very quickly, where this is a constantly evolving body of knowledge, which to me is where we need to go. So as I'm moving forward, I'm going to be creating a series of avatars for different topics within the area of funding that will be, in my mind, the smartest, brightest source of information on the planet, other than me. Maybe we'll see. But in some cases, better than me. And this collective is going to grow over time as I continue to train up and make it. It won't be immediately obsolete because I posted it one day like a newspaper, and the next day it's yesterday's news. So we're going to see a lot of this take place, but part of the technology, for lack of a better word, is the data acquisition, the data placement into the avatar, so that this body of knowledge can grow. And there are just things we're looking at right now from a project management, like a funding campaign as a specialty form of a project. How do we get all the information in on the campaign? How do we get every member of the capital team to implement or submit their data, information, documents, conversations with investor candidates in, so this avatar is, can tell any other team member, oh, Joe just talked to Sally. Sally's making a soft commitment to invest in this, but she's asked for this information. We need to get that information to tip her over and make her an investor instead of an investor candidate. That's where I see going with this on a project by project basis, where we take my knowledge on funding and now we break it down to a singular capital campaign, funding campaign for a single business like Knowledge Avatars, where it can answer all the questions that any team member has or any investor candidate has, and be able to do that quickly and succinctly, which both demonstrates that this company is cool and it's on the bleeding edge and it's got all these capabilities, but it elevates the credibility of the pitch, of the story, and makes this a more attractive investment candidate, an investment opportunity, than somebody who's out there still using a slide deck and standing on a platform in front of people, when they could have done better simply to call up their knowledge avatars and go, I'll let my knowledge avatar answer all your questions. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Zach, you put a question: track sales transactions. I'm not clear what you're looking for there, but I'm assuming that if you have
about blockchain, I think it's about waking track with blockchain.
Well, maybe not. I could
Okay,
if I were engaged in sales, and I wanted a sales assistant, and I was thinking to myself, how do I keep track of all my prospects plus all this? We've all seen the old style salesperson who would walk into a guy's office and sit down and talk about the guy's kids, his birthday, what's going on in his life. And everybody goes, wow, you know your customers inside and out. You are truly in an advisory position to that person because of everything you know about them. You can make a good recommendation on what they should buy or not buy. And it aids the sales efforts. You can do the same thing with a knowledge avatar, where you can pull down information off the net about a sales prospect. I'm doing some stuff right now. We're looking at a investment in a housing development. And there's all kinds of information on the internet that I can find and put into an avatar specifically for this project. And it becomes aware of all the many different variables and facts and information that are out there that can help the team figure out who's the right investor candidate, what do I need to tell them, what should my offer look like, and put together promotional material to tell that story most effectively. So if you're a salesperson, if you're tracking sales transactions, yeah, it can tell you every sale that you ever did over the last 5 years, or it could also tell you everybody you talked to about a sale where a sale didn't occur, where maybe you should go back to them and hit them up again, if that's what you're asking.
Right. I don't know how much time we have left. Karl, it's up to you.
We've got a couple minutes, so yeah, why don't you share where you think you're at, particularly with regard to helping sales customer prospects raise their own money.
Yeah, that's always customers raising their own money is a challenge, as you said earlier, some of the people we're working with, they're nonprofits. They are schools and so forth, and they have to find them funds to do it. We're open to doing things like crowdfunding campaigns with them. We can help them with that. Maybe we can find sponsors to help them raise funds. In other words, sponsors would be companies that can benefit somehow with that audience, whether it's a school or a library or whatever it is. So we're open to discussing those kinds of things with them. Certainly, if an organization wants to integrate our product into their product, we can talk about incremental sales. In other words, we get a piece of the action rather than something all up front. So those are all different ways in which we can raise some money.
Let me add to that. So again, a lesson for the audience: if you find yourself in a situation where you have people who want to buy your product or service and they can't because they don't have the money, then one of the things that you may be able to do, and Knowledge Avatars is in a uniquely qualified position to do this, is you might create a series of what you call funding templates for your customers. So as Emiliano expressed, they might want to go out and do a GoFundMe campaign as a charitable group, whether they're a school, a library, a nonprofit community support organization. And they may go, yeah, that would be great. Well, Emiliano can create a template for raising funding for the specific purpose of acquiring a knowledge avatar, where it's a kind of a fill in the blank. I'm XYZ charity in this community. I provide this service to my community. I want to add a knowledge avatar to my portfolio to help my community, either internal operations or outreach to whoever I'm supporting. And we need money in order to acquire the avatar, just like we need money to pay for the lights or money to pay for operations. And this template could be created and placed within an avatar with associated documents and videos and how to do this, which Emiliano can put on his site and say, hey, if you want to get a knowledge avatars and you're short of funding, here's one on how to raise funding through a GoFundMe campaign, or here is how to go raise funding through a sponsorship campaign, or any number of different types of fundraising where that nonprofit or school or whoever can be given the tools and assistance in raising money for the benefit of knowledge avatars. And all this can be put in a knowledge avatar so that Emiliano doesn't have to be on the phone 20 times a day talking a customer prospect. Through this, he can simply say, well, if you're short of funding, we have a number of templates to help you raise funding. Here's my avatar. Tell it what you are, where you're going, and then ask it, what's available to help you in your fundraising efforts. And by doing this, he's expanded his customer base, not from just the people who have money in their pocket today, but everyone who wants his product who don't have money in their pocket today. And he's building a rapport relationship with his customers, which is way beyond what most people commonly do. So this creates an interesting opportunity for him to not only sell product, but to engage and build relationships with his customers by helping them understand better and simpler ways to raise funding and making it easier for them. So
if anybody would like to contact me about any of these topics that we talked about, my email is emiliano@knowledgeavatars.ai, and Emiliano is spelled Emiliano.
So here is Emiliano's webpage, where you can go to Knowledge Avatars and learn more about what he's doing. And as we discussed today in today's program, he's looking to raise funding now after doing most of the heavy lifting. He's got product ready to go to market, but it has such a diversity of applications that we're now looking at strategic partners within market niches and funding each of those opportunities separately. Maybe completely different deals, because we'll have 5, 10, 20 different ways each particular strategic partner may participate, and trying to figure out what all those different variations are. But he's identified one niche, which is charities and schools and so forth, who may not have funding immediately. And we're going to talk about how we can create an avatar to facilitate and support that effort to help them get to a point of having enough money to put an avatar within their toolbox for them to use. So much we could cover in today's session, and we have used up our hour. But I think that if you go to Knowledge Avatars, we're going to be putting up information on the website talking about this type of activity, different funding opportunities, different market opportunities. And you're all welcome to go and talk with Emiliano about this. But this is an illustration of how in the successful funding show, we're talking about how to get funding. And there are actually several different ways of doing that, many of them which may work successfully within the time and budget of the company that is looking for funding. But it's necessary to get information together to know who to present it to, who most cares, funding soulmate, because this shortens the entire path, the entire time expended in a campaign, and allows you to basically raise your funding, get back to business. But in this case, we may find that funding and business go hand in hand in recruiting customers or prospects into customers. So this is something that all of you watching this show may take into consideration. Is there a way you can help your prospects, your customer prospects, get their own funding so they can buy your product or service? How do you integrate access to funding to your operations to help your sales or help you move forward? And quite frankly, all of you can use the aid and benefit of working with a knowledge avatar, either as a digital receptionist for your business or as a sales assistant or in some other capacity. We're still defining all the potential ways that that can happen, where value can be achieved, and it's relatively inexpensive and therefore affordable to everyone who's listening to this show. So with that, thank you, Emiliano, for being on the show today. Thank you for talking about funding of an AI business. But as you can see, even though AI is core to everything that Emiliano is doing, he has a lot of the same challenges that everybody else has in raising funding and telling his story and working through this. So there will be a lot more information coming forward as we go through the process of designing and implementing a capital campaign towards a number of targeted investor candidates in 2025. Thank you,
Karl. Thank you, everybody, for participating.